Are you serious, Emma? Me? Pretend to be your boyfriend? His voice was a whip, cutting through the air like a sharp blade, and her world crumbled in seconds, shattering into 1,000 invisible pieces. A desperate decision, born of the purest intention to protect, but made under the overwhelming pressure of an innocent lie, was about to explode into devastating public humiliation, a scandal that threatened to consume everything. But, like a bolt from the blue, something unexpected, something that defied all logic and reason, was about to change the course of everything, turning the tables in a way no one could predict. Emma felt the ground vanish beneath her feet, not like a stumble, but as if the earth itself had opened to swallow her. The air thinned in her lungs, each breath an excruciating effort, as if oxygen had become an unattainable luxury. Daniel's words, uttered with an almost amused coldness, a veiled sarcasm that hurt her more than any shout, still echoed in the room, heavy, cruel, reverberating through every fiber of her being. There were no more tears to shed, the well had dried up, replaced by a chilling emptiness that settled in her chest, a frightening numbness that anesthetized the sharp pain but left a trail of desolation. She looked at the man in front of her, her eyes fixed, but not truly seeing him, as if his image were distorted by a fog of despair. Humiliation was an invisible cloak, yet so dense, so heavy, that it seemed to crush her, suffocate her, stripping her of the ability to react. He didn't notice, or pretended not to notice, the colossal damage he had just inflicted, the devastation his words had wrought. Her breathing was shallow, almost imperceptible, a thin thread of life, a minimal effort to stay upright, not to collapse right there. Her dignity, once an unshakable pillar that sustained her amidst adversity, now crumbled into tiny pieces, falling silently at her feet, like sand through her fingers. Time stopped, frozen in that instant of pure desolation, an eternal moment of pain and helplessness. At 28, Emma carried on her shoulders the weight of a resilience forged in years of uninterrupted sacrifices and responsibilities that had matured her prematurely. In Austin, a city that pulsed with life and indifference, a melting pot of opportunities and challenges, she was the unshakable anchor of her small family, the pillar that kept everything from falling apart. Her mother, Claire, with health as fragile as crystal and a pure heart that radiated kindness, depended on her for almost everything, from the simplest tasks to the most complex decisions. Her younger sister, Sarah, was about to get married, an event that should have been the culmination of a dream, the peak of happiness, but which had turned into a silent nightmare for Emma, a web of anxiety and fear. Sarah's fiancé's family, traditional and with high social expectations, had created a web of innocent but dangerous lies that now threatened to suffocate them all, trapping them in a snare of appearances. Claire, in her eagerness to see her daughters happy and successful, had invented a boyfriend for Emma, a very good young man who worked with her, to appease the insistent questions and curious glances of the fiancé's family matriarch, a woman of rigid principles and keen insight. Emma worked as a personal assistant for Daniel Sterling, a tech entrepreneur, a man of resounding success but almost clinical coldness, an impenetrable wall of professionalism. His life was a meticulous schedule, every minute planned, every task executed with surgical precision, and his feelings, an unfathomable mystery, kept under lock and key. The luxurious penthouse in South Congress, where Emma spent most of her weekdays, was an exact reflection of its owner, impeccable, organized down to the last detail, but devoid of any human warmth, a sterile and impersonal environment. Emma was the perfect cog in this complex machine, efficient, discreet, always one step ahead of Daniel's needs, anticipating every wish, every demand. She prided herself on her impeccable professionalism, her ability to manage her boss's complex agenda, to keep everything in order, to be the personification of competence. But, to Daniel, she was just an employee, a replaceable piece on his corporate chessboard, without any value beyond her functions. The approaching wedding of Sarah, which would take place in Denver, intensified Emma's anguish, turning her into a bundle of nerves. The lie about the boyfriend had grown, taking on gigantic proportions, and now Sarah's fiancé's grandmother, Rebecca, an imposing and curious figure with a reputation for letting nothing slide, demanded to meet the lucky man at the wedding itself. Sarah, desperate, had called Emma the night before, her voice choked with tears, a sob that tore at her heart. "Emma, please, help me. Matthew's grandma won't stop asking. I don't know what to do. If she finds out Mom lied, it'll be a scandal, a disgrace we'll never forget, and Mom won't be able to handle it, her health is so fragile." The pressure was unbearable, an overwhelming weight that suffocated her. Emma felt the weight of her sister's happiness and her mother's fragile health in her hands, a responsibility that consumed her. She needed a miracle, a desperate solution, a boyfriend for tomorrow, a savior who could get them out of that mess. That morning, as she organized the last details of Daniel's trip for an international conference, Emma gathered all her courage, every last drop of bravery she had left. It was an absurd idea, bordering on ridiculous, but the only one she had left, the last card in a losing game. She waited for the right moment, when Daniel was about to leave, his expression impatient, his mind already on his next appointments, his multi-million-dollar deals. With a trembling but firm voice, she explained her situation, her mother's innocent lie, her sister's desperation, the urgent need for an escort for the wedding, a role only he could fill. She asked, with the dignity she still possessed, that he, Daniel, pretend to be her boyfriend for a weekend, a minimal sacrifice for him, but salvation for her. The silence that followed was deafening, a vacuum that swallowed the air. Daniel looked at her, not with anger, but with a cold, almost amused incredulity, a cruel amusement. A mocking smile played on his lips, a gesture that hurt her deeply. "Are you serious, Emma? Me? Pretend to be your boyfriend? That's ridiculous. I have better things to do than participate in your family charades, your soap opera dramas." His words, sharp as blades, hit her squarely, tearing at her soul. The humiliation was complete, public, and the pain, excruciating, an open wound bleeding in silence. Daniel's mocking smile was an image seared into Emma's mind, an invisible scar that burned. She felt her face flush, not with shame, but with a contained anger, a silent indignation that bubbled beneath the surface of her composure, threatening to explode at any moment. That man, so distant in his world of unattainable privilege, had no idea of the abyss of despair she was in, the depth of her anguish. To him, it was a ridiculous request, a trivial inconvenience in his impeccable schedule. To her, it was the last hope of protecting her family from a humiliation that Claire, her mother, with her fragile heart and weakened health, would not endure. Emma took a deep breath, a conscious effort to control the torrent of emotions that threatened to overflow, engulfing her completely. She couldn't afford to break down there, in front of him, to show any sign of weakness. That moment, the cold and direct rejection, only solidified the perception she already had, a bitter truth that had accompanied her for a long time. In Daniel's world, she was invisible, disposable, an unimportant shadow. From a very young age, Emma had learned to be strong, to build walls of resilience around herself. The early loss of her father, a devastating blow that shook the foundations of her family, had forced Claire to take on the role of head of the household, but her mother's fragile health soon put her in a vulnerable position, making her dependent. It was Emma who, still a teenager, with the innocence of youth but the responsibility of an adult, took the reins, working exhausting odd jobs, studying at night by the dim light of a lamp, always with the unwavering goal of giving Sarah a better future and ensuring Claire's comfort and security. She had sacrificed her own dreams, her own passions, for the sake of her family, burying them in a forgotten corner of her soul. Fashion design college, a cherished desire since childhood, a colorful and vibrant dream, was left behind, replaced by technical courses and jobs that barely paid the bills but ensured their livelihood. She never regretted it, for her mother's smile and Sarah's joy were her greatest reward, her only solace. But with each new sacrifice, a small part of Emma faded, leaving a trail of silent melancholy, a veiled sadness that accompanied her. Life in Austin was a daily battle, an incessant struggle for survival. The tight rent, the bills that kept coming, piling up on the kitchen table, Claire's medication, Sarah's studies, everything fell on Emma's shoulders, a heavy burden that bent her. The job with Daniel, though demanding and impersonal, devoid of any human warmth, was her financial salvation, the only lifeline in a sea of debt. He paid well, and that was all that mattered, the only criterion she could consider. She dedicated herself body and soul, striving for perfection in every task, in every detail, hoping that her competence would make her indispensable, irreplaceable. But Daniel's indifference was an insurmountable wall, a barrier she would never be able to break. He saw her as a machine, a tool, not as a woman with dreams, fears, and a heart that bled in silence. That request, made with such difficulty, with such courage, was the final proof that she did not exist for him beyond her functions, beyond her role as an assistant. Emma returned to her desk, her body heavy as lead, her mind in a turmoil, spinning in a whirlwind of thoughts. Daniel's rejection was not just a no to her request, it was a no to her pain, to her humanity, to her very existence. She felt a pang of resentment, a bitter feeling she rarely allowed herself to feel, but which now invaded her with force. How could he be so oblivious to the suffering of others? So encapsulated in his bubble of privilege, in his golden world? She looked at her phone, Sarah's contact flashing on the screen, a light that reminded her of her responsibility. How would she break the news to her sister? How would she explain that the last hope had been crushed by the cold indifference of a rich and powerful man? The image of Claire, with her hopeful eyes and unwavering faith, came to her mind, and a new wave of despair hit her, suffocating her. She couldn't disappoint them. She couldn't allow Sarah's happiness to be stained by a lie she herself had helped build, a house of cards about to collapse. The afternoon dragged on, each minute an eternity, each second a torment. Emma tried to concentrate on work, but Daniel's words repeated in her head, a silent torture, a constant echo. She felt trapped, with no way out, like a wounded animal caught in a snare. The idea of confessing the truth to Matthew's family, of exposing Claire's lie, was unbearable, a prospect that made her tremble. The shame would be overwhelming, a tsunami of humiliation, and the impact on her mother's health, unpredictable, a risk she couldn't take. She remembered the stories Claire told about Rebecca, Matthew's grandmother, a woman of rigid principles, who valued honesty above all else, an imposing figure. If the truth came out, Sarah's wedding could be at risk, crumbling before it even began. And Emma couldn't allow that. She was the protector, the problem solver, the fortress of her family. But, this time, she was alone, without resources, without hope, on the brink of a precipice. The weight of responsibility was crushing, and the loneliness, an unbearable burden that consumed her from within. Night fell, dragging on with torturous slowness, like a dark veil covering the city. Emma was in her small apartment, a modest refuge, but full of affection, the smell of Claire's home cooking lingering in the air, an aroma that would normally bring comfort, but which now was a bittersweet contrast to the storm brewing within her. Sarah, oblivious to the depth of her sister's despair, with the innocence and joy of someone about to realize a dream, spoke animatedly about the wedding preparations, the details of the wedding dress, the guest list, each word a painful reminder of the charade. Every word from Sarah was a silent stab in Emma's heart, making her feel like an imposter, unable to share her sister's genuine joy, an overwhelming weight of guilt. Claire, sitting in her favorite armchair, watched her daughters with a tired but happy smile, her eyes shining with hope. "Your sister is so radiant, Emma. And you, my dear, also deserve all the happiness in the world. I'm sure your boyfriend will love Denver, the city is so charming." The mention of the boyfriend made Emma's stomach churn, a knot of anxiety tightening. She forced a smile, a Herculean effort to maintain the pretense, while guilt and fear gnawed at her from within, like a slow poison. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. Daniel's words, the image of his mocking smile, repeated in a cruel loop in her mind, an incessant torture that prevented her from finding peace. She tried to think of alternatives, of other people who could help her, but the network of contacts in her simple life was limited, restricted to people who shared her own difficulties. Her closest friends, like Hannah, her college classmate from years ago, were in financial situations as tight as hers, were already committed to their own dramas and responsibilities. Asking for such a big favor, which involved a trip and a complex act, seemed impossible, an insurmountable mountain. With each idea that arose, an insurmountable barrier presented itself, blocking any path. The loneliness of her struggle was palpable, a weight that prevented her from breathing, from finding relief. She felt trapped, with no way out, like a wounded animal caught in a snare, awaiting the final blow. The next morning brought with it a new wave of humiliation, a cruel reminder of her situation. Emma arrived at work with deep dark circles under her eyes, betraying her sleepless night, and a sense of exhaustion that went beyond the physical, reaching her soul. Daniel was already in his office, immersed in his papers, as if nothing had happened, as if yesterday's desperate request had never existed. He didn't look at her, didn't mention the absurd request from the day before, maintaining his cold and distant demeanor. His indifference was almost more painful than explicit rejection. It was as if she didn't matter at all, as if her pain was irrelevant, a mere detail in his universe. While preparing Daniel's coffee, the bitter aroma of the liquid filling the air, Emma overheard him on the phone, talking about an important business dinner he would have that night, a high-level event. He mentioned the need for an escort, someone who could impress his partners, someone who was up to his reputation. The irony was cruel, a low blow from fate. He refused to help her in her deepest need, in her moment of greatest despair, but sought company for a trivial social event, a mere formality. Emma felt a pang of envy, a feeling she detested, that made her feel small and petty. Envy of the ease with which he navigated his world, of how he could buy solutions to his problems, while she drowned in a sea of difficulties, struggling to keep her head above water. She wondered if he ever stopped to think about the lives of his employees, the struggles they faced outside of work, the pains and sacrifices. Probably not. He lived in a bubble of privilege, where problems were solved with a phone call or a check, where life was an easy game. That contrast, the abysmal difference between their worlds, was a constant reminder of her own insignificance in his eyes, of her subordinate position. She served the coffee, her hand steady, but her heart in pieces, bleeding in silence. Later, Sarah called again, her voice more desperate than ever, a cry for help. Matthew's grandmother had called Claire, asking for details about Emma's relationship, what he did, where he lived, with a curiosity that bordered on suspicion. Claire, in her innocence and good faith, had invented a few more stories, weaving an even more complex web, but Rebecca seemed suspicious, her keen eyes noticing the gaps. "Emma, she wants to see pictures. She said she wants to make sure you're happy, that you're not alone. She's coming to Austin tomorrow, before we go to Denver, to help us with the final preparations and to get to know you better." Panic seized Emma, a chill down her spine that paralyzed her. Pictures? Matthew's grandmother coming to Austin? The charade was about to spectacularly collapse, in a public disgrace, and the humiliation would be even greater, unbearable. She felt the air leave her lungs, her head spin, the world around her losing focus. The situation had escalated to an unsustainable level, a point of no return. She needed a solution, and she needed it now, before it was too late. Time was running out, and with each second, the abyss became deeper, more threatening. The news of Rebecca's imminent arrival, Matthew's grandmother, hit Emma like a punch to the gut, a blow that left her breathless. She felt the panic transform into a wave of nausea, her stomach churning in a knot of anxiety that consumed her from within. How could she sustain the charade now? Rebecca, a woman with keen insight and a sharp mind, with a reputation for letting nothing slide, would surely unmask the lie in a matter of minutes, with frightening ease. The image of Claire, with her pale face and fragile heart, crumbling before the truth, was a constant torment, a vision that haunted her. Emma found herself caught in a web of lies she hadn't woven, but which now threatened to engulf her completely, dragging her down. The impending humiliation would not be hers alone, but that of her entire family, a blow to everyone's dignity, and that was an unbearable burden, a weight that crushed her. That same afternoon, as she desperately tried to find a solution, her mind spinning in search of a way out, Emma overheard Daniel on the phone. He was talking to Andrew, his colleague and right-hand man, about the difficulty of finding an escort for that night's business dinner, a crucial event. "I don't know, Andrew. Options are limited. I need someone presentable, discreet, and who understands the dynamics of an event like this. I can't just bring anyone, I need someone up to par." Daniel's words, though not directed at her, were a cruel echo of her own situation, a mirror reflecting her pain. He sought a solution for a trivial problem, a mere social formality, while she drowned in a sea of despair, fighting for her family's honor. The irony was so palpable that Emma felt a shiver, a chill that ran down her spine. She, who was the personification of discretion and competence, the perfect assistant, had been discarded without even a second thought, without any value. Emma felt a pang of bitterness, a sour taste in her mouth. So that was it. A trade. He hadn't acted out of genuine empathy, out of compassion, but out of convenience, out of self-interest. That small glimpse of hope that had arisen in her heart crumbled into ashes, into dust. She was, once again, a tool, a solution to his problem, a piece in his game. The humiliation, though avoided in front of her family, now manifested itself in a different, more subtle, more veiled, but equally painful way, an open wound bleeding from within. She was good enough to be a fake girlfriend for his business, for his appearances, but not for his personal life, for his heart. The contrast was cruel, a truth that hurt her. At the end of the workday, Emma dragged herself home, her body exhausted, her mind in tatters, like a boat adrift in a storm. Claire and Sarah were excited, their eyes shining with anticipation, preparing the house for Rebecca's arrival, oblivious to the impending tragedy. "Emma, you need to rest. Grandma arrives tomorrow, and you need to look beautiful for your boyfriend," Claire said, with a sparkle in her eyes that broke Emma's heart, a painful reminder of the lie. Sarah, in turn, showed pictures of the wedding dress, talked about the party details, completely unaware of the storm brewing, of the abyss opening up. Emma tried to smile, tried to participate in their joy, but each laugh, each comment about the wedding, was a painful reminder of the charade that was about to collapse, to explode into 1,000 pieces. She felt like a fraud, a liar, and guilt consumed her, corroding her soul. Later, as she tried to organize her thoughts, her mind in a labyrinth with no exit, Emma received a call from Hannah, her longtime friend, her confidante. Hannah, with her always lively and energetic voice, asked about Sarah's wedding preparations and, inevitably, about Emma's boyfriend. "So, girl? Where's the lucky guy? I want to meet him. Sarah told me he's a knockout, a real prince." Emma felt a lump in her throat, words stuck. She couldn't lie to Hannah, her longtime friend, her soulmate. But she also couldn't tell the truth, the humiliation of having been rejected by Daniel, the charade her mother had created, the shame. She invented a flimsy excuse, saying that her boyfriend was traveling for work and might not be able to make it to the wedding, a lie that hurt her. The lie, told to a friend, hurt even more, a blow to her own integrity. With each new lie, Emma felt a piece of her soul get lost, drain away, and shame corroded her from within, leaving her empty. The loneliness was a heavy burden, and the feeling of being trapped, with no way out, was overwhelming, an endless torment. The next morning dawned gray, a perfect mirror of Emma's state of mind, who felt as cloudy and colorless as the sky. Rebecca, Matthew's grandmother, would arrive in a few hours, and the panic transformed into a physical anguish, a tightness in her chest that made breathing difficult, as if an enormous weight were upon her. Emma tried to get ready, but each piece of clothing seemed to tighten, to suffocate her. Each movement was an excruciating effort, as if her body were heavy as lead. She looked at herself in the mirror, seeing a stranger with sunken eyes, marked by the sleepless night, and an expression of defeat that made her feel even smaller. What would she say? How would she act? The charade was so fragile that it seemed about to collapse with a simple breath, with the slightest breeze. She felt the weight of Claire and Sarah's expectation, who were radiant with the visit, oblivious to the approaching storm, to the impending tragedy. That day, Emma decided to go to work earlier, seeking temporary refuge in routine, in the security of the familiar. She hoped to find the office empty, a place where she could breathe and try to organize her thoughts, her mind in chaos. But, to her surprise, Daniel was already there, sitting at his desk, his expression serious, immersed in important documents, as if the outside world didn't exist. He glanced at her, a quick and impersonal look, devoid of any emotion, before returning his attention to work, to his business. Emma felt a shiver. His presence, so indifferent and distant, only accentuated her loneliness, her feeling of abandonment. She wondered if he even remembered the desperate request she had made, the humiliation she had suffered. Probably not. For him, it was just another day, another series of appointments, another day in his perfect life. While preparing coffee, the strong aroma of the liquid filling the air, Emma overheard Daniel on the phone, talking to an important client, his voice laden with authority. He spoke of an ambitious project, of calculated risks and grand rewards, of the business world she barely understood. His voice was confident, assertive, the voice of someone who was in absolute control of his own destiny, of his own life. Emma felt a painful contrast with her own life, where she felt adrift, without any control, a leaf in the wind. She was a piece in other people's game, a puppet of circumstances that dragged her into an abyss of humiliation, without power of choice. Envy, a feeling she struggled to repress, to hide, bubbled up again, a poison that consumed her. Envy of his freedom, of his ability to decide, to shape his own future, to be the master of his own destiny. Later, while reviewing Daniel's agenda, each appointment a reminder of his distant world, Emma saw a reminder for that night's business dinner. The name of the restaurant, one of the most exclusive and sophisticated in Austin, and the guest list, prominent figures from the business world, only reinforced the abyssal distance between their worlds. She imagined Daniel, impeccable in his perfectly tailored suit, smiling and shaking hands, while she would be at home, facing Rebecca's charade, the impending humiliation. The injustice was a knot in her throat, a weight that suffocated her. She, who was so competent and dedicated, was being relegated to a secondary role in her own life, while he enjoyed all the opportunities, all the privileges. At noon, Emma's phone rang, a jarring sound that made her jump. It was Claire, her voice choked with emotion, almost a whisper. "Emma, Rebecca has arrived." She's so nice, but she's asking about you. She said she wants to meet you before we go to Denver. She wants to have lunch with us today, here at home. And she asked if your boyfriend would come too. Emma's heart pounded, beating erratically in her chest. Time had run out. The charade was about to be exposed, to collapse in a public disgrace, and the humiliation would be inevitable, overwhelming. She felt a chill down her spine, a premonition of disaster, that the worst was yet to come. How could she escape this trap? There was no more time to invent excuses, to postpone the inevitable. She was trapped, with no way out, and shame consumed her completely, leaving her empty and hopeless. Emma hung up the phone, her hands sweaty, her heart pounding erratically in her chest, a drum of panic. Claire's excited voice, Sarah's radiant anticipation, everything mingled in a whirlwind of guilt and panic, a maelstrom of emotions that dragged her down. Rebecca was on her way, and with her, the inevitable exposure of the charade, the public unmasking she so feared. She needed to go home, to face what was coming, but the idea of facing the matriarch's keen gaze and her mother's disappointment was a torment, a torture that paralyzed her. The humiliation would not be hers alone, it would be a blow to Claire's dignity, who had lied with the best of intentions, to protect her daughters, and to Sarah's happiness, whose wedding could be compromised, destroyed. Emma felt a chill down her spine, a sense of helplessness that left her paralyzed, unable to react, to think. She tried to concentrate on the last tasks of the day, but Daniel's words, spoken the morning before, came back to her mind, a cruel echo, "I have better things to do than participate in your family charades." His indifference was an insurmountable wall, a barrier of ice, a constant reminder of her insignificance in his world, of her subordinate position. She wondered if he even imagined what it was like to be in such a desperate situation, where family honor was at stake, where everything could fall apart. Probably not. He lived in a universe where problems were solved with money and influence, with a simple phone call, not with sacrifices and desperate lies, with the pain of the soul. This perception left her even more isolated, more alone in her battle, in her silent struggle against fate. Emma grabbed her bag, her body heavy, her mind in tatters, like a shipwrecked vessel. As she passed Daniel's office door, she saw him on the phone again, his expression serious, but his voice laden with an urgency she had never witnessed, an intensity that surprised her. He was talking about a high-risk investment, about the need to close a crucial deal before the end of the day, a tight deadline. "Andrew, I need you to finalize this documentation. We can't miss this opportunity. It's a game changer for the company, for our future." The intensity of his conversation contrasted with her own silent despair, with her mute pain. He was fighting for millions, for an empire, for power. She, in turn, was fighting to maintain her family's dignity, to avoid a humiliation that seemed inevitable, overwhelming. She left the building, Austin's strong sun seeming to mock her with its brightness, with its cruel glow. Traffic was chaotic, a sea of cars and honking, and each honk, each hurried car, seemed to amplify her anxiety, her panic. Emma felt a lump in her throat, an uncontrollable urge to cry, to scream, to simply disappear, to vanish from the face of the earth. But she couldn't. She was the strong one, the problem solver, the fortress of her family. She needed to maintain her composure, even if inside she was crumbling, in pieces. The image of Rebecca, with her penetrating gaze, already haunted her, a shadow that pursued her. How would she invent an excuse for the boyfriend's absence? How would she sustain the charade in front of someone so astute, so intelligent? Upon arriving home, the smell of fresh coffee and homemade cake enveloped her, an aroma that would normally bring comfort, coziness, but which now only intensified her anguish, her pain. Claire and Sarah were in the living room, radiant, chatting animatedly with Rebecca, oblivious to the approaching storm. The matriarch, a woman with neatly combed white hair and a welcoming smile, but with eyes that seemed to see into the soul that read thoughts, greeted her with a warm, almost suffocating hug. "Oh, Emma! So glad you're here. Your mother and sister have talked so much about you and your boyfriend. I'm eager to meet him." Rebecca's smile was gentle, but her gaze fixed on Emma was one of almost investigative curiosity, an X-ray into her soul. Emma felt her face burn, her heart race, pounding in her chest. She forced a smile, words stuck in her throat, unable to speak. The charade was about to be unmasked, and the humiliation, the pain, the shame, would be public and overwhelming, a fatal blow. She was in the eye of the hurricane, and there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Rebecca's smile, though gentle and welcoming, felt like a relentless magnifying glass on Emma's soul, exposing every nerve, every lie. Each question about the boyfriend was a silent stab, a blow that hurt her deeply, and each glance from the matriarch, an X-ray that threatened to expose the charade in its entirety, unmasking her. Emma felt cold sweat trickle down her back, a chill that paralyzed her, words stuck in her throat, unable to form a coherent sentence. She tried to stammer an excuse about Daniel's work, about an unavoidable commitment, an urgent meeting, but the words sounded empty, without conviction, like a distant echo. Claire and Sarah, noticing their sister's obvious discomfort, tried to intervene, changing the subject, diverting attention, but Rebecca was persistent, with a curiosity that bordered on investigation, a determination to discover the truth. The humiliation was palpable, the air heavy with tension, with the expectation of imminent disaster. As Emma desperately tried to find a way out of the situation, her mind in a whirlwind of thoughts, the unthinkable happened. The doorbell rang. A firm, unexpected ring that echoed through the house, breaking the tense silence. Everyone exchanged glances, confused, their eyes wide. No one was expecting visitors. Claire, with a look of surprise, got up to answer, curious. Emma felt a shiver down her spine, a strange premonition, a feeling that something big was about to happen. Who could it be? Amidst the chaos of her thoughts, she heard Claire's voice, laden with surprise and a touch of reverence, almost a whisper of admiration. "Mr. Sterling? What a surprise! Please, come in." The name echoed in the room, freezing the blood in Emma's veins, paralyzing her. Daniel? Here? In her house? It was unbelievable, surreal. Daniel Sterling entered the living room, impeccable in his perfectly tailored suit, exuding an aura of power and mystery, of elegance and authority. His eyes swept the room, resting for an instant on Emma, who was paralyzed, her face pale, colorless, as if she had seen a ghost. He didn't smile, but there was an intensity in his gaze that she had never seen before, a depth that intrigued her. Claire, Sarah, and Rebecca watched him with a mixture of curiosity and admiration, almost reverence, before this imposing man. Daniel, with surprising calm, a composure that made him even more mysterious, addressed Claire. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Hayes. I apologize for the intrusion. I'm Daniel, Emma's colleague. I came to pick up Emma. We had an unforeseen issue at work and I urgently need her help." His voice was firm, but there was a nuance, a tone that Emma couldn't decipher, a mystery in his words. Emma felt an electric shock run through her body, a wave of adrenaline. Unforeseen issue? Urgency? He was lying. But why? What had led him to do that? She looked at him, searching for an explanation in his eyes, but he maintained an impenetrable expression, a wall she couldn't breach. Rebecca, with her keen insight, watched the scene with redoubled attention, her eyes reading every movement, every expression. "Colleague?" the matriarch asked, with a tone that was not of suspicion, but of sharp curiosity, of someone seeking the truth. Daniel, without hesitation, turned to Rebecca, and a slight, almost imperceptible smile appeared on his lips, a glimpse of something new. "Yes, Mrs. Hayes. And, more than that, Emma and I have a relationship that goes beyond professional. I apologize for not coming sooner, but my schedule is quite complicated, full of commitments." Daniel's words dropped like a bomb in the room, exploding in surprise and relief. Claire and Sarah exchanged glances, their eyes wide with surprise and relief, an enormous weight lifted from their shoulders. Emma felt her face burn, a mixture of shame and a glimmer of hope that arose in her heart. He was lying, but he was lying for her. Why would he do that? What had made him change his mind so drastically? She couldn't understand, her mind in a whirlwind. Daniel, with impressive naturalness, extended his hand to Emma, a gesture that surprised her. "Emma, darling, we need to go. The project can't wait." The word darling made Emma's heart leap, beating erratically. It was an act, she knew, but the way he said it, with such conviction, left her stunned, breathless. She stood up, still in shock, and took his hand. That touch, unexpected and firm, was the beginning of something completely new, something she could never have predicted. The humiliation had been avoided, but the confusion and mystery were just beginning, weaving a new plot in their lives. Daniel's touch was firm, almost protective, and Emma felt a shiver run down her arm, an electric current that awakened her. She followed him out of the apartment, leaving behind the confused glances of Claire and Sarah, who were still trying to process what had happened, and the even keener gaze of Rebecca, who seemed to have understood more than she let on. The silence in the elevator was dense, laden with unspoken questions, with mysteries hanging in the air. Emma couldn't tear her eyes away from Daniel's profile, trying to decipher what had led him to do that, to act so unexpectedly. Why was he, the man who had rejected her with such contempt, with such coldness, now here, pretending to be her boyfriend, her savior? Her mind was in a whirlwind, unable to process the unexpected twist, the radical change in her life. As they reached the parking lot, Daniel opened the car door for her, a chivalrous gesture that caught her by surprise, an act she would never expect from him. Emma got in, still in shock, and he walked around, getting behind the wheel. The engine purred softly, a muffled sound, and the luxury car glided through the streets of Austin, leaving the building and the confusion behind. The silence stretched for a few minutes, heavy, filled with unspoken thoughts, until Emma, gathering all her courage, all her bravery, finally broke the ice. "Why did you do that, Daniel? Why did you come to my house? Why did you lie?" Her voice was a whisper, laden with a mixture of gratitude and indignation, of relief and confusion. Daniel kept his eyes fixed on the road, his expression impenetrable, a mask of indifference. "You were in trouble, Emma. I overheard your sister's call. And, to be honest, I don't like seeing people in such embarrassing, such desperate situations." His answer was cold, almost mechanical, devoid of emotion, but there was a hint of something Emma couldn't identify, a mystery in his words. He didn't seem to be doing a favor, but rather fulfilling an obligation, a duty. "Besides," he continued, his voice a little softer, almost a whisper, "I needed an escort for tonight's business dinner. And you, Emma, are the most discreet and competent person I know. It would be a fair trade, a mutually beneficial agreement." Emma felt a pang of disappointment, a bitter taste in her mouth. So that was it. A trade. He hadn't acted out of genuine empathy, out of compassion, but out of convenience, out of self-interest. That small glimpse of hope that had arisen in her heart crumbled into ashes, into dust. She was, once again, a tool, a solution to his problem, a piece in his game. The humiliation, though avoided in front of her family, now manifested itself in a different, more subtle, more veiled, but equally painful way, an open wound bleeding from within. She was good enough to be a fake girlfriend for his business, for his appearances, but not for his personal life, for his heart. The contrast was cruel, a truth that hurt her. They drove to Daniel's apartment, the luxurious penthouse she knew so well. Emma, still stunned, watched the urban landscape pass by the window, the city lights twinkling. The city, once a backdrop for her struggles, now seemed a stage for this unexpected charade, a drama she was about to star in. Upon arriving at the penthouse, Daniel led her to one of the guest rooms, an elegant and impersonal space. "You can get ready here. I have a dress that might fit. It was bought for an event and never worn." His suggestion was practical, but Emma felt a lump in her throat. A never-worn dress, probably from some ex-girlfriend or escort he had discarded, who had been forgotten. She was just another in a long list, a substitute. As she prepared for dinner, Emma looked at herself in the mirror, seeing a stranger reflected. The dress, an elegant and discreet model, fit her body perfectly, enhancing her curves. She felt like an imposter, wearing clothes that weren't hers, playing a role that didn't belong to her, a character in a play. The image of Daniel, so distant and unattainable, lingered in her mind, a shadow that accompanied her. She knew she was entering a world that wasn't hers, a world of appearances and conveniences, of power games. But, for her family, for Claire and Sarah, she would do whatever it took, she would sacrifice herself. The pain of humiliation, though present, was now tempered by a silent determination, a strength that arose from within her. She would be the perfect girlfriend, the impeccable assistant, the woman he needed for that night. And, the next day, she would return to her own life, with the dignity she still possessed, with her head held high. The business dinner at Austin's exclusive restaurant was a spectacle of luxury and power, a stage where the city's elite gathered. Emma, seated beside Daniel, felt like an actress on a grand stage, playing a role that didn't belong to her, a character in a complex play. The elegant and discreet dress made her feel like an imposter, an intruder in that world, but the determination to honor Daniel's sacrifice, however much it was for mere convenience, kept her firm, with an upright posture. She watched Daniel interact with the other businessmen, his confident demeanor, his sharp intelligence, his ability to dominate the environment. He was a fish in his own aquarium, swimming gracefully in a sea of sharks, a master of his game. With each forced smile, with each comment about their relationship, Emma felt a knot in her stomach, a pang of anxiety, but maintained her composure, the mask of serenity. Daniel, to Emma's surprise, was a convincing actor, a master of dissimulation. He introduced her as his companion, his inspiration, with a naturalness that left her perplexed, speechless. He held her hand under the table, a subtle touch that seemed more a reminder of the role she was supposed to play than a gesture of affection, of tenderness. However, at times, Emma felt a strange warmth in that touch, an unexpected connection that made her question his initial coldness, the wall he had built. She watched him closely, noticing details she had never perceived in the office, the way his eyes sparkled when he spoke of his projects, the contained passion in his voice when discussing technological innovations, a glimpse into his soul. He wasn't just the cold and distant boss, there was a depth there that she was beginning to glimpse, a complexity that intrigued her. During dinner, one of Daniel's colleagues, Andrew, approached the table with a forced smile. He cast a curious glance at Emma, a mixture of surprise and suspicion, of judgment. "Daniel, what a surprise. I didn't know you had company. And Emma, our assistant, right?" Andrew's tone was laden with insinuation, with malice, and Emma felt her face burn, shame invading her. Daniel, however, remained calm, his composure unshakable. He smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and placed his hand on Emma's back, a protective, almost possessive gesture. "Andrew, please. Emma is much more than just my assistant. She is my partner. And yes, she is brilliant in everything she does, an exceptional woman." Daniel's words, spoken with unwavering firmness, with an authority that brooked no questioning, silenced Andrew, who retreated with a nod, still with a suspicious look, but not daring to contest. Emma felt a mixture of relief and confusion. Daniel had defended her, had elevated her, even if it was part of the charade, the act. That gesture, the way he had protected her from Andrew's judgmental gaze, affected her in an unexpected way, touching her heart. She looked at him, and for a brief instant, their eyes met, a meeting of souls. There was something there, a spark, a silent understanding that transcended words, that went beyond reason. She didn't know what it was, but she felt a tremor in her heart, an emotion that frightened and fascinated her at the same time. That man, whom she thought was so distant, was revealing layers she would never imagine, a complexity that attracted her. At the end of dinner, as Daniel bid farewell to the guests with his usual elegance, Emma felt a deep tiredness, but also a strange sense of accomplishment, of duty fulfilled. She had played her part, had helped Daniel with his business dinner, and, more importantly, had avoided her family's humiliation, saving them from disgrace. In the car, on the way to the penthouse, the silence was different. It was no longer heavy, oppressive, but rather a comfortable silence, filled with unspoken thoughts, with a new connection. Emma looked at Daniel, who drove with the same concentration as always, but with a different aura. She wondered what he was thinking, what had led him to this unexpected attitude, this turn of events. The charade was just beginning, but it was already changing the dynamic between them in a way Emma couldn't predict. The line between acting and reality was beginning to blur, and the mystery surrounding Daniel only grew, making him even more intriguing. The drive to Denver, in Daniel's luxury car, was a strange mix of tension and anticipation, as if they were on the edge of a precipice, unsure of what awaited them. Emma, seated beside him, watched the rural landscape of Colorado pass by the window, farms and small towns replacing the frantic bustle of Austin, a changing scenery. The silence between them was no longer the heavy silence of indifference, of distance, but a comfortable silence, filled with unspoken thoughts and a growing curiosity, a mutual attraction. Daniel, at the wheel, seemed more relaxed, less the cold and calculating businessman from the office, revealing a more human side. He even made a few comments about the landscape, about the beauty of the countryside, something Emma would never expect from him, a pleasant surprise. She felt she was seeing a different side of Daniel, a more human, more sensitive side, that deeply intrigued her, that attracted her. During the trip, they rehearsed their stories, like two actors preparing for an important play. Daniel, with surprising seriousness, asked about Emma's family, about the wedding details, about what he should know to be the perfect boyfriend, the role he was playing. Emma, in turn, explained the nuances of the family dynamic, Claire's importance, Sarah's personality, Rebecca's rigidity, every detail crucial to the charade. With each question and answer, they got to know each other a little better, not as boss and assistant, but as two strangers who were about to embark on a complex charade, on an unexpected adventure. Emma felt a strange intimacy arise between them, a connection forged in necessity and complicity, an invisible bond that united them. Upon arriving in Denver, the small city was celebrating, buzzing with wedding joy. Sarah and Matthew's house was meticulously decorated with flowers and lights, and the family welcomed them with warm hugs and curious glances, trying to decipher the new dynamic. Claire and Sarah were radiant, relieved and happy to see Daniel beside Emma, the charade working perfectly. Rebecca, with her keen insight, watched their interaction with redoubled attention, like a detective, but a satisfied smile played on her lips, a sign of approval. Daniel, to Emma's surprise, fit perfectly into the role. He was charming, attentive, and treated Emma with a tenderness that seemed genuine, that made her question reality. He talked with the family, told jokes, and even helped with the final preparations, showing a side she would never imagine. Emma watched him, perplexed, feeling her heart race with each gesture, each word from him, an emotion that invaded her. Sarah and Matthew's wedding was an emotional event, full of joy and celebration. Emma, beside Daniel, felt part of a dream she had helped build for her sister, a moment of pure happiness. During the party, in a moment of relaxation, the band began to play a romantic song, and the master of ceremonies announced a game, now, a kiss for the loving couples. All the couples on the dance floor kissed, and everyone's eyes turned to Emma and Daniel, with anticipation. Emma felt her face burn, her heart pounding erratically, a mixture of panic and anticipation. She looked at Daniel, who looked back at her, an intense sparkle in his eyes, a silent promise. Daniel, without hesitation, leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't an act, a perfunctory kiss, a mere fulfillment of a role. It was a soft, lingering kiss that conveyed a mixture of surprise, affection, and a contained passion, an explosion of feelings. Emma felt an electric shock run through her body, a wave of sensations that left her breathless, speechless. She closed her eyes, surrendering to the moment, forgetting the charade, the audience, everything around her. That kiss, unexpected and overwhelming, revealed feelings she didn't know existed, feelings that transcended convenience and necessity, that went beyond reason. When they separated, the family's applause echoed in the room, but Emma could only see Daniel's eyes, which looked at her with an intensity that made her tremble. The charade had become real, and Emma's world would never be the same, transformed forever. Daniel's kiss still burned on Emma's lips, an unexpected flame that had ignited something deep within her, a passion she didn't know existed. The party continued around them, with music and laughter, but the world seemed to have shrunk to just the two of them, to a private universe. Daniel's eyes, fixed on hers, conveyed an intensity that completely disarmed her, leaving her vulnerable. She felt her heart pounding erratically, a mixture of fear and an euphoria that left her breathless, gasping for air. The charade had dissolved, revealing a truth she didn't even dare to dream of, a love that emerged from the unexpected. They slowly pulled apart, the family's applause sounding distant, muffled, and a silence laden with meaning settled between them, a silence that spoke more than 1,000 words. Later, at Sarah's house, where the family was staying, Emma and Daniel found themselves in a more secluded corner, away from curious glances and comments. The night was starry, with a clear and bright sky, and the fresh air of Denver brought a welcome relief to the tension that enveloped them, that consumed them. Emma, still stunned, her mind in a whirlwind, was the first to speak, her voice a whisper, almost inaudible. "Daniel, what was that? Why did you kiss me like that?" She needed answers, needed to understand what had happened, what that kiss meant. Daniel looked at her, and for the first time, Emma saw a vulnerability in his eyes, a hesitation that humanized the cold and distant businessman, revealing a side she didn't know. He took a deep breath, and his words came out in a low but firm tone, laden with emotion. "Emma, I don't know what happened. It wasn't planned. But, when I kissed you, I didn't feel like I was pretending. I felt something real, something that caught me by surprise." His confession hit Emma like a wave, a shock that made her tremble. She felt a tremor run through her body. He had felt it too. It wasn't just her illusion, a fantasy. "I didn't feel like I was pretending either, Daniel," she confessed, her voice choked with emotion, almost a sob. I don't know what to think, what to do with this." Daniel's gaze intensified, fixing on hers. "I know what to think, Emma. I'm in love with you. Madly in love." His words, direct and unexpected, made Emma's world spin, as if she were on a carousel of emotions. In love? Him? The man who had rejected her with such contempt, with such coldness, was now here, declaring his love. It was surreal, unbelievable, a dream she didn't dare to dream. She felt a mixture of joy and fear. Fear of the barriers, of the social differences, of his world that seemed so distant from hers, so unattainable. "Daniel, we are from such different worlds. I'm your assistant. Your family, my family." She tried to argue, tried to find reasons to back away, but he interrupted her, holding her hands firmly, tenderly. "I know, Emma. I know all that. But what I feel for you is real. And I'm willing to face whatever it takes to try. Would you be willing to try too? To risk everything?" Emma looked at their intertwined hands, feeling the warmth of his touch, the connection that united them. That man, who was once the personification of indifference, of coldness, was now here, offering her a future, a love she would never imagine, a fairy tale. She thought of Claire, of Sarah, of the dignity she had fought so hard to protect, to maintain. And now, here was the chance for a happiness that was all hers, a gift from fate. She took a deep breath, feeling a new strength arise within her, a courage she didn't know she possessed. "Yes, Daniel. I'm willing to try. Willing to risk everything for us." A smile, the first genuine smile she had seen on him, lit up Daniel's face, transforming him. That moment, the mutual confession, the decision to risk, was the beginning of a new journey, full of uncertainties, but also of an overwhelming hope. The charade had ended, and love, unexpected and powerful, had found its way, blossoming in their hearts. The confession of love under the starry Denver sky had sealed a silent pact between Emma and Daniel, a commitment that transcended words. The decision to try, to risk everything for a feeling that had blossomed amidst a charade, was a turning point in their lives, a point of no return. The next morning, as they said goodbye to Emma's family, Rebecca, with an enigmatic smile and a look of wisdom, shook Daniel's hand. "Take good care of our Emma, young man. She deserves all the happiness in the world, and I see that you can give it to her." The matriarch's words, laden with ancestral wisdom, were a tacit acknowledgement of the truth she had perceived, of the connection that united them. Claire and Sarah, radiant, hugged Emma, their eyes moist with joy at seeing her finally happy, with a different sparkle in her gaze. The drive back to Austin was different. The silence in the car was now one of complicity, of whispered plans and exchanged glances, of a future unfolding. Emma and Daniel talked about the future, about the challenges they would have to face, about the social barriers they would need to overcome. Emma expressed her fears about the difference in their worlds, about social judgment, about the perception of being the ex-employee in her new role, the insecurity that haunted her. Daniel, with a seriousness that calmed her, with a firm and protective voice, assured her that he would be by her side, that they would face everything together, hand in hand. He encouraged her to resume her dreams, to study nursing, to build her own career, away from his shadow, so that she could shine on her own. That support, that unwavering belief in her potential, was a balm for Emma's soul, an injection of confidence. Emma, with renewed courage, made an important decision, a crucial step towards her independence. She left her job as Daniel's personal assistant. Not out of lack of gratitude, but to build her own independence, so that their relationship could flourish on equal ground, away from the old dynamics of power and subordination. Daniel, understanding her need, supported her unconditionally, offering her all the support so she could study and dedicate herself to her new passion, nursing. She remained in the penthouse, but now as his companion, his partner, his equal, and no longer as his employee. The transition was challenging, full of adaptations, but each step was a testament to the love and mutual respect that was growing between them, strengthening them. The first major challenge arose when Daniel invited her to a charity gala event, one of the most important among Austen's elite, a world she didn't know. Emma hesitated. The fear of social judgment, of being perceived as an intruder in a world that wasn't hers, paralyzed her. "Daniel, I don't know if I can do it. People, they'll look at me, they'll comment. I don't belong in that world, I don't fit in." Her insecurity was palpable, visible in her eyes. Daniel, however, hugged her, his eyes conveying an unwavering strength, a certainty. "You belong with me, Emma. And I belong with you. It doesn't matter what others think. We'll face this together, head held high." That moment, the decision to fight side by side, solidified their commitment, making it unbreakable. They began to frequent each other's worlds, gradually overcoming social barriers, the differences that once seemed insurmountable. Emma introduced Daniel to her friends, to Hannah, who received him with surprise and joy, seeing her friend's transformation. Daniel, in turn, took her to social events, proudly introducing her as his companion, his life partner. With each new step, each new challenge overcome, their love grew stronger, deeper. Emma, finally, allowed herself to stop being afraid. She accepted Daniel's love body and soul, recognizing her own worth and the happiness she deserved, that she had earned. That night, on the penthouse balcony, with Austen's lights twinkling in the distance, Daniel hugged her, and their eyes met, a sparkle of love. "I love you, Emma," he whispered, and she replied with the same intensity, with the same passion. "I love you too, Daniel." They slept together for the first time as a loving couple, their mutual surrender sealing a commitment that transcended social differences and past fears, a new beginning. The next morning, the sun filled the room, illuminating the two of them, embracing in a peaceful, serene sleep. The future was uncertain, as always, but the certainty of the love that united them was unshakable, a rock in the midst of the storm. They had found in each other the strength to overcome adversities, to build a future where differences were not an obstacle, but rather the foundation of a unique and true love story, an epic romance. Humiliation had turned into victory, pain into triumph, and invisibility into a love that shone brighter than the city lights, more intense than any star. True dignity is not in avoiding humiliation, but in finding the strength to overcome it, allowing love and perseverance to build a future where differences become the foundation of an unbreakable connection, an eternal bond.